Hello, everyone. Welcome to Food and Flow Spring Seasonal Care. Of course, I am Sherry Vitale, the founder of Food and Flow Integrative Nutrition. I decided to record this because I truthfully didn't know how many folks would be able to attend a live session, and then it's difficult to please everyone with the times that I choose. So we'll see how this offering goes, and if there's more interest, I'm happy to have live sessions where you can actually ask questions and we can connect with one another, which is definitely important during this time. So I think we'll go ahead and just dive into the material. Let me actually share my screen with you so you can see it. All right. Hope everyone is having a lovely day today. Okay. Like I mentioned, today's topic, nourishment and self-care this spring. I'll be pulling from more traditional nutrition topics, also a little bit of Ayurveda and yoga in this presentation as well, because I love to blend them together for that full holistic picture of what might be going on with health and wellness. So spring has sprung, right? I think we're already a few weeks into spring. And what's great is if we observe and really tap into our intuition, spring actually just naturally shows us the path to self-care. It's just following those natural biorhythms. We can think of it as time to literally and figuratively maybe plant new seeds. It's also a time of new growth. You might notice lots of green when you step outside of your door. Lots of sunshine, so I think that's a great reminder to get outside and help your body get some of that vitamin D, that mood boosting vitamin D. And it's also just the season to really let go of anything that might be weighing us down, kind of that spring cleaning idea, clearing and lightening just a little bit. And nature really is there to harvest what we need. This time is almost a kapha season, if you're familiar with Ayurveda. So that actually means that earth and water are predominant. And so in Ayurveda, there's the concept of like creates like and opposite creates balance. So if you think of earth and water, what does that create? Mud, right? That kind of stuck in the mud, a little bit of heaviness. And so if we are following those natural biorhythms and going with our intuition, we'll be adopting practices that will help us feel less stuck in the mud, so to speak, lighten our load a little bit. So as we move through today, we'll be talking about three things mostly. Simple shifts we can make for spring, seasonal eating and herbs, self-care practices, and then movement to help support your health and wellness this season. Like I mentioned, it's time to lighten up. So when we start to get into the concept of spring nourishment, it's time to really favor foods that are warm, foods that are light, and not those that are heavy, fatty, or overly sweet. So now is not the time for the fried foods or for a lot of heavy dairy as we move forward. Again, it's that kapha season, so we want that opposite to create the balance by lightening up our foods just a little bit. So in general, the diet's lower fat. It might be higher carbohydrate. A cleansing diet. I have my notes here to make sure I remember to say everything to you guys. High and light bitter foods and lots of greens, just like nature's showing us. So I encourage you to maybe just close your eyes for a moment and take this time to check in. What foods are you naturally craving right now? And perhaps you've just eaten and you're like, I am absolutely craving nothing right now. Think back to, just the past few weeks. What foods has your intuition been telling you to eat? Chances are, and there are going to be a few of the foods that we're going to talk about here in just a moment. All right. So shifting into more spring nourishment here, I'll first talk about the grains that are recommended that are a little bit lighter for the season. I think, at least when I talk to clients, a general trend that I seem to notice is that folks are very carbohydrate fearing. So you need not be. Like, carbohydrates are actually our body's preferred source of fuel. I think sometimes where it can get a little out of hand is how we're portioning them and how we're preparing them and using them. So keep that in mind, and maybe that's something we'll chat about in later offerings. But we can always select more nutrient-dense choices for our grains, like some of the ones I'll talk about today. Because they are higher fiber, they do offer pretty good nutrients and pretty nutritious nutrients, right, is what they are, and antioxidants that help fight disease. So there's plenty of benefit to them. Okay, so many of these are lighter, like I mentioned, and very nutrient dense. For example, amaranth is quite high in protein, just like a quinoa would be, and really quinoa could be on this list too. Many are antioxidant rich. That would be the amaranth, millet, and buckwheat. And barley actually contains beta-glucan, which is a compound actually found in mushrooms, like a polysaccharide that can be helpful for lowering cholesterol. So they all have benefits. Amaranth, what's great about amaranth is it is an ancient grain that is a gluten-free option. In fact, I just had a breakfast porridge this morning made of amaranth that was quite delicious. You can sprout and soak it the night before to reduce anti-nutrients, which are those compounds like phytic acid that can actually bind some minerals and reduce your absorption of them. You could blend amaranth in smoothies, use in soup, really anywhere that you would use rice. Moving next to barley. Barley is not gluten-free. Look for hulled instead of pearled barley, just to get that whole grain benefit there. And barley is super versatile. It could be used in lots of soups, lots of chilies, stews, and also anywhere that you would use rice. Rye, I'll be honest, I'm less familiar with. I think the only times that I have truly eaten rye are in like a rye bread. So that's what initially comes to mind. Is not a gluten-free option, but does have a little bit less gluten overall than wheat might have. Cornmeal would be another great choice, which is gluten-free. I mean, corn is gluten-free. And I put for those who can tolerate, because for some, corn can be quite inflammatory and can have some gut or promote some gut issues. So this is for those who can tolerate it. Millet is another ancient grain, small pearls, and it actually has the highest calcium content of all grains. A little fun fact there. Again, you could soak it the night before to reduce those anti-nutrients, and then use it as a side dish, add it to salads, again, a breakfast porridge. I think I've served dal over millet before. There's just many options there. And last, buckwheat is, even though it has wheat in the name, is a gluten-free option, and I think it makes a really lovely breakfast porridge. So these are just some lighter, less heavy grains to experiment with, and I really encourage you to if you've never tried them. Especially if you're gluten-free, there's many options here to choose from. Moving along to fruit, one of my favorites. So the fruits here are generally, or may not necessarily be seasonal where you live right now. So something to keep in mind for sure. But these are great choices in that they provide more of an astringent taste, which is a taste that is really nice to pull in the spring. That astringent quality, you can almost think of when you I don't know, what is pretty astringent, like a cranberry, which I actually don't have up here. Just kind of like that pucker in your mouth is that astringent sensation, and it's helpful for drying up secretions. A big one is like such as, say it, diarrhea. If you're, you have that going on. Actually, blueberries have been studied quite a bit to help with that. So some great choices are apples, which also provide wonderful detox support. They're a great source of quercetin, which actually is very beneficial for the gut. That provides phase 2 detox support if you're a nutrition nerd like me. And I can explain those 2 phases in a moment. Berries, also great detox support, and they also provide ellagic acid, which is really wonderful for fighting inflammation in the body. That's a micronutrient. So they're great for phase 1 detox support. We also have cherries, grapefruit, lemons and limes. Lemons are super alkalizing. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Pears, pomegranate, another detox support. Prunes, I know they're not very trendy, but prunes, there's so much research around them for really helping support the health of your bones. So it's a great choice to add in more often. And raisins. If there's anything else I want to say about these guys, yeah, it's the polyphenols in prunes that have the bone protective effect. So as far as detox, you don't need to get boggled down by the different phases, but sometimes I like to know, especially in the spring, you might see all these cleanses being offered, juice cleanses or things, even fasting cleanses. And part of it is like, we really need nutrients to naturally detox so our liver can do what it needs to do. So it's kind of counterintuitive to not give yourself nutrients during this time. Phase 1 of detoxification is just really reactions, oxidation and reduction reactions that help metabolize toxins, because they're actually initially fat soluble and we want them to be water soluble so they can move out of the body, right? Phase 2 would be the toxins are made water loving so that they can move out of the body, and lots of different foods help support these processes. And a few are listed here. All right, moving along to lean protein. Like I mentioned, time to shift away from the heavier meats like red meat, fried foods, really dense and fatty foods. And it's not that fat is bad for you. In fact, fat is probably like my favorite, it's not really a food group, but it's my favorite thing to add. It's so just nourishing, helps with satiety, helps you absorb those fat-soluble vitamins. It's not to say that, but it's just more often maybe lightening up a little bit this season. And really give your digestive system a break. Fat is a little bit harder to digest. So fats are not bad. Fats are not bad. They're nonetheless a healthful choice, but this is just shifting to lighter habits for spring. With that said, great options are beans, chicken breast, the white meat of chicken, eggs. So maybe the whites more often than the yolks, fish, lentils, loin cuts of meat generally tend to be leaner, tofu, and then maybe considering digestive supports if you do know that you're going to have fattier proteins, maybe digestive bitters, apple cider vinegar, always diluted, always, maybe a little bit, no more than a tablespoon, and water before a meal just to help with that support there. All right, heading into the veggies, which might be most important. When we're filling our plates, vegetables should really be the all-star. And luckily this season, there's many to choose from. So what we're really looking for with spring nourishment and vegetables is a bitter taste. This bitter taste actually helps support digestion and tells your gallbladder like, hey, it's time to get this bile in action and start digesting, whatever the meal ahead may be. Bitter taste, and this is according to my Yoga of Herbs book, which is a little more Ayurveda, is naturally detoxifying and antibacterial, and it can help us restore our sense of taste. So it's always good to consider. I think when we eat a lot of overly processed foods, really salty and sugary foods, that sense of taste, we've just lost it in a sense. So Some great options in the spring are arugula, asparagus, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, daikon radish, dandelion greens, which you may actually have some in your yard. You know, I've helped myself to some in the backyard, a less polluted area for sure. Endive, leeks, as shown in the picture. Nettles, which may be considered more of an herb, so we could really talk about that there too. Nettles are great, just very nourishing, like iron rich for a plant, and they actually have some antihistamine benefits this time of year, which can be nice if you have some allergies going on. Radishes, spinach, and watercress, which a lot of these are great detox support too, especially the watercress, the leafy greens, dandelion greens, so that bitter taste really helps with that as well. All right. Anything I want to say there? I know if you've never done anything with nettles, if you actually have the plant, of course you don't be careful when handling those. They've got the little pricklies on them that can cause, I mean, it's not completely painful, but you will feel it, and you would never consume nettles raw for that reason. All right, chatting a little more about herbs and spices. The flavor to favor here would be pungent, the pungent taste that helps promote digestion as well. Let's see, we've got black pepper, which would be pungent, little asterisk there. Again, dandelion root, just pulling that in, great liver support, gut health support. It's actually a prebiotic, which is food for the probiotics. Ginger, holy basil or tulsi, which can also be a great adaptogen, stress support. If you wanted to make a tea, which I know for some it's been a stressful time lately, that would not be for pregnancy or trying to conceive. Holy basil wouldn't be. And again, with most herbs, always, you'll want to like really seek out an experienced, knowledgeable herbalist, you know, integrative health practitioner, someone who's pretty versed in what herbs could be helpful for you. I always use the example of natural doesn't always mean safe. So I always encourage doing more research before diving in to your own regimen. Parsley, sage. Sage is wonderful for drying up secretions also, like a good sage tea if you've got a runny nose. And turmeric, always using turmeric with black pepper and a little bit of dietary fat to really help you absorb the curcumin that's in there. And I think that is all I want to say about those guys. And there's probably plenty more, just to name a few. All right. Jumping into the other section, just a few more things. In the spring, pure raw honey is a preferred sweetener, as opposed to, you know, something heavier. I think a little bit of maple syrup would be fine. You could even consider local honey, right, for the added allergy. Was it desensitization? I can't talk this morning. The added allergy benefit there. Let's see. Not for baking with. That's an important thing. You are essentially destroying the properties of the honey, and per Ayurveda, honey becomes toxic when you really cook with it and bake with it. So something to keep in mind there. Vinegars, like I already mentioned, to help support digestion, apple cider vinegar, maybe making some salad dressings out of it. Lemon water is a great way to start the day. Lemons are very alkaline, even though they seem acidic when you taste them in the body. They have that alkalizing effect, health promoting effect. And it's just a great way to get hydration. I find that the days I actually start my morning with like warm lemon water, I tend to keep motivated to hydrate myself throughout the day. And also lighter meals. It is time to lighten the load a little bit. I think in winter we tend to comfort foods, more oily foods, and now is time to shift. But then also remembering that midday our digestive fire is the strongest, so maybe patterning our day so that around noon is when we're eating the most can be a suggestion. All right. So we're shifting gears a little bit from the nutrition piece to self-care, which is absolutely important and maybe even more so during this time. So a few kind of like naturally, I don't say the word detox, but it just, you'll know what I mean, naturally almost cleansing, detoxing, spring self-care ideas are dry brushing is one that you may have heard of. And that's really a practice that can increase your circulation, start getting that lymph moving, lymph fluid. It exfoliates. You can think of it as like a natural detox for the skin. And it involves rubbing your skin with a brush, of course, that is coarse, natural fiber bristles over the entire body. Would not be for those, obviously, with like any kind of open wound. You'd avoid those areas, or folks with psoriasis, things like that, that it might aggravate. But it can be a lovely practice otherwise. So that might be suggested, if you have like a morning routine, to do the dry brushing first. And then to move to massage, or what is called abhyanga, massaging oils into the skin before showering. Same idea, to promote circulation. As it is spring, the theme of lightness, right? Choosing light oils like almond or grapeseed, as opposed to, like a sesame oil that you might use in winter to be warming. So who I've learned from described it as vigorously massaging limbs in a circular motion, especially around joints. Full body, let the oil sit on for a few minutes to get the benefits, and then hopping into the shower. He always talks about having a cold shower. I have never worked up to that yet, so maybe in the really, really hot summer. But that's supposed to be really like stimulating and good for the skin. But a cold shower, should you choose. Keep in mind, you'd probably want to have separate towels for when you dry off and when you're practicing this massage, so you don't ruin any towels that you really love. Keep that in mind. Moving on, I actually have no experience whatsoever with saunas, so I don't feel that I can really tell you a whole lot about that, other than that they are very cleansing and tend to be recommended this time of year. So that might be something you do a little more research on your own. There's also nasal irrigation with a neti pot you can use that really helps flush that mucus out of nasal passages. And it doesn't have to be just when you're feeling stuffy. Some like to practice this every morning along with these other self-care supports. Could be done daily. You'd only use distilled water, lukewarm, obviously not very hot. And you could use a saline solution with salt and baking soda, and then obviously washing your neti pot after each use to avoid bacteria buildup. And let's see, daily movement. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, actually, so I won't dwell there. And then journaling, I think, can be a great component, at least that's helped me, reflection on really letting go of habits, thoughts that no longer served you. Time to spring clean those out and focus on things that you're trying to build for yourself this year. And I know 2020 has been a heck of a year, right? So I think this practice can be beneficial for so many reasons. I do have a few friends who have some businesses around journaling and those types of things. So if anyone's interested, I could put you in touch. So moving back into what I was mentioning, the building heat and seasonal movement, I'm always going to encourage yoga, right? I'm a yoga teacher. It's my favorite way to move. If it's not for you, that's okay. It's not for everybody. And do know that yoga is more than just what you do on your mat. I think sometimes we get locked into I can't do yoga, I'm not good at it. Well, it's well beyond the physical practice. So with tapas, is one of the niyamas, and I actually wrote down some things from the Heart of Yoga that define tapas, because I think it's interesting. It can be a concept that takes some time to apply and understand. Tapas is applying heat to the body so that we may cleanse it. Essentially, whatever we do to keep the body fit. It could be paying attention to our food choices. It could be paying attention to our posture. It could be paying attention to our breathing. Is our breath shallow, or are we really taking these full belly breaths? And it's also moving our body to break a sweat, to actually generate that heat, that tapas. So that could be whatever it looks like for you. For some folks, holding downward facing dog for 2 minutes might build a lot of heat. For others, that may not as much, and it might be more like a vinyasa, increased flow, moving with your breath. So whatever can help you to break a sweat. Again, it doesn't have to be yoga there. So there could be other activities. There's also asana or yoga poses that can help support natural detox, natural cleansing. You can think of twists as a great way to massage abdominal organs and help with elimination. A few things about twists: always done before back bends. So you wouldn't, do a whole bunch of back bends and then dive into your twists. It's great to sit on folded blankets anytime that you're going to do twists, just to help find evenness in the hips and stay safe. And you'll always lengthen on the inhale and then exhale on your actual twist. So always have to lengthen and then always exhale with twist. And if anyone wants any more guidance, like a little one-on-one about that, I'm happy to share, but you could probably YouTube or look up some yoga twists. Marichasana 1 or 3 would be some examples that you could take a look at. Forward folds, also very helpful for massaging those abdominal organs. And you can just think that's as simple as sitting on some blankets and inhaling to lengthen, and then exhaling to fold forward and try to reach toward your toes. Forward fold. And then vinyasa, we talked about that. Also cleansing breaths, never a bad idea. You could look up lion's pose. That's a really great one for just relaxing the jaw and getting out some of that, I don't know, that energy. It feels a little silly sometimes, but it's really fun and invigorating to do. And then alternate nostril breathing is a great way to just bring balance to the body, help lessen some anxiety, and you can look that up as well. But just knowing that focusing on your breath is a great way to support your overall health always, but especially, this time of really clearing out. Is there anything else I want to say about that? As always, let me know if you have any questions. So kind of jumping back to the food, and I realized maybe I should have moved this information up to more the nutrition piece, but you live, you learn, right? These are some seasonal meal ideas that, in case you're like, well, okay, she talked about all these foods, how can I incorporate them? Some ideas: breakfast, you could have the warm lemon water we talked about. And then any one of these ideas. So a porridge made with one of the ancient grains, lighter ancient grains, topped with berries or those prunes, ginger, pungent spice, and then drizzling lightly with pure honey. Eggs, you'll see my example, 2 whites with 1 yolk, scrambled with arugula and then wrapped in a corn tortilla. Apples baked with ginger and cinnamon, serving alongside a Brussels sprout hash. And then turmeric and black pepper tofu scramble served with sauteed asparagus. And then if you wanted to have a tea, those are some of the supports that I talked about there. If you're looking for really quick and easy, having your grains prepared ahead of time, a lot of times I'll do that. So I've already got the amaranth or millet ready to go. And then in the morning, I just add a little bit of, little almond milk or whatever milk you choose, then the spices and everything, and then heat it back up. So you don't actually have to cook the grain. Lunch and dinner meal ideas. Using coconut milk, so a soup using coconut milk and white beans to make a creamy asparagus, leek, or nettle soup, or all of the above. Lentils prepared with generous amounts, lots in there, of arugula, dandelion greens, or spinach. Carrot, ginger, and turmeric soup. Plate method. So I could probably do a whole class on this. And in fact, the private practice that I contract with has actually a lot of great information on this. So always know, I'll table that for a moment, but the plate method is essentially half of your plate is non-starchy vegetables. When I say non-starchy, I'm talking about the things like tomatoes, bell peppers, radishes, carrots, not the potatoes. And then a quarter of your plate protein, and then another quarter of your plate, your starch, like potatoes, or a grain, like your amaranth. So plate method, baked chicken or fish served alongside radishes, roasted radishes, which if you've never done that, it's delicious. Roasted radishes and Brussels sprouts. And then millet, in place of rice maybe, that you've jazzed up with some herbs. This next one, got a few little typos down there, but this I actually made 2 nights ago. Garbanzo beans topped, not top-ed, with seasonal greens pesto. I think I used like some mustard greens I had, kale, maybe a dandelion green or 2, with grated carrot and fresh squeezed lemon and herbs, and serving that over amaranth. A little special note here. I debated whether or not to even offer this. I mean, is this a time people are going to think about, seasonal eating so important? And honestly, I don't want to make assumptions for everyone, because I've talked to lots of folks over the past few weeks, and I'll be honest, some are thriving during this time with more of a chance to focus on themselves with self-care. And for others, it's been very difficult. So we are all in different places. And I hope that by no means, I can't tell you how to feel. So feel however, but by no means are you ever expected to follow all of these things, these guidelines. I'm of the mentality, it's whatever you can do, whatever small shift, even if it's just like, I'm going to switch up my normal rice for some millet, whatever it might be. It is a time to be gentle with ourselves. This COVID-19, it's been difficult for many. It's also not always possible to have all the foods that you want to have on the menu. I talk about, having the eggs or the fish, maybe you couldn't find them at the grocery store. So just a few considerations. Grow your own, like if you want to have more fresh produce available. And of course, Justin and I can offer extra support with this if you have any questions. Radishes and greens grow quite quickly. I've urged lots of folks to look into produce donation boxes, CSAs, farmers markets that are doing delivery or quick pickups. And then also know that frozen vegetables and canned are okay too. There's benefits to all of them, depending on which angle you're looking at. Frozen vegetables can be a great way to have some extra on hand. Canned, you might want to look for no salt added, maybe cans without BPA. If you can find them, again, being gentle with ourselves during this time. And then if you purchase fresh, use those up first, and you may consider longer lasting produce, like cabbage lasts pretty long, beets, parsnips, obviously the potatoes, spaghetti, squash, things like that. And making note of what you have, and then really doing your best to use those up first. So we will wrap up this little chat today with more reflection. I encourage you to just sit with some of the information that you've heard and think about one small shift that you can make today, or maybe if it's not today, this week, soon, to support seasonal wellness. What's one thing that seems tangible, one thing that seems realistic, something that speaks to you that you might be able to incorporate? So I truly, truly thank you for taking the time to join me for this first little Food and Flow offering. I'm super excited to be sharing knowledge with folks. As always, feel free to reach out if you have questions, if there's anything else that you might like to see. And then I do, of course, offer one-on-one nutrition consultations for a little more individualized support that actually may be covered by your health insurance. So reach out. I'm happy to hear from you. And I wish everyone a very beautiful day. Take care of yourselves.